Let's Chat. I'm Kanan Chandran, the publisher of StormAsia.com, and welcome to this ongoing series of discussions, the WED WEB CHAT, where we bring together people with expertise and experience in a variety of areas to talk about the issue of the day. Today's session is about acceptable behavior. What is acceptable behavior today? What would you consider as acceptable behavior, and how has that changed? Just a few examples, maybe for me, when I was growing up at meal times, it was eat your meal, have a conversation maybe. Today you feed the phone first, and then the phone remains at the dinner table or during the meal, and people are constantly referring to it. So who do you focus on? The phone, whoever you're talking to there, or the people at the table with you, or the food, So is that acceptable to you? Not to the older guard. It's fine for the newer generation, I think, but we will find out. And of course today, 20th of January, is the day President Donald Trump steps down and Joe Biden steps in. And a lot of that has also got to do with, was what Trump did acceptable behavior? That's a question we can also talk about. And so I think the whole notion of acceptable behavior is global, and because of the way we are also connected via the internet and the World Wide Web, we see and do so many things from other cultures and countries, and we try and do some of those things, and maybe it's not so well received. So today's session, we have 4 panelists. Let me introduce them to you before we get into the session. We've got Rebecca, the Regt, the facilitator and coach and an affiliate with multiple organizations. Tess Eu, who is the regional Corp Comms Intern at Rolls-Royce Motorcars. We've got George Kypraios, who's the CEO of the Yefira Group, a corporate finance and growth advisory boutique. Joe Sidek, executive director of Sidek Productions, and is one of Malaysia's strong advocates for the arts. So welcome, Joe. Welcome, George, Tess,
hello,
Rebecca. And right off the bat, I'd like to ask, given the amount of time that you've spent on this planet, what annoys you? What do you not find acceptable behavior?
Well, using your phone when you're having dinner and you're right in front of someone, then I think I find that very hard to take. I'm 62. I probably am the oldest here. I find I'm old school. Yeah. That's one unacceptable behavior, and be part of a lynching mob, which is something recently happening in Malaysia, that I find really sad, that people are just going online and just attacking without thinking. Be part of a mob or pack.
Okay. The wolf pack mentality. Rebecca, how about yourself?
So I'm going to say something, it may be controversial, but I feel like it doesn't really matter what religion. When we go back to the essence of respect that is in all religions and in all cultures, unacceptable behavior, I feel like it's the intention behind it. So when we're present with people and we're respectful of people, it can look multiple ways depending on the culture. But when you actually feel that there's intention to connect with people, that becomes very different. So obviously, like lynch mobs, it's just, there's no consciousness there for me. So when we're not present with ourselves and with other people, I feel that that's when behavior starts going, outside the boundaries of, I'm going to call decent.
Being the youngest, what are your views on this?
So for me, I would say exploitation is a very big thing. I'm speaking in terms of a fashion point of view. So exploitation of human capital, we have exploitation of heritage and culture, exploitation of information, and lastly, natural resources. So these 4 things are so jarring in our industry, but we are working towards trying to improve ourselves.
Okay. Oh, very sustainable mindset over there.
For you.
It's probably representative of your generation after our generation raped and plundered the planet. George?
All the things we do in business and in our personal life, I do think, just building on what Rebecca said, that the lack of respect, where we're not listening to each other. A lot of times we're talking at each other and we're not actually taking that time to not fill the void and let silence So take in an idea that someone else has, even if you disagree with what she or he is saying. So that rush to judgment, I think, is something I'm really troubled by.
How do you guys find this pandemic influencing perhaps what is now viewed as acceptable or not acceptable? I think you've got, here we've certainly got, in Singapore, we've had instances of people who have quietly organized little parties where they're not supposed to during this pandemic period, where I think it's only allowed 8 people, there were 20 people. And the silly thing is they put it out on social media. It's like, what's the point of having a hush party when you go and do that, right? So one is not too smart. The other thing is, why go about doing it at all? Do you think the pandemic would cause sort of people to push against resist all these new sort of structures that have come up? Have you seen any of that? I mean, you're in a controlled environment at the moment, right, Joe? You're not allowed to leave the house. And this is not the first time. So how are you guys reacting to that?
No, I think that the time that people have at home, not doing anything, so you're online a lot. So you are seeing what everyone else is doing. And then you're also participating. And it's like what Rebecca said, you're not even thinking. You're just clicking on the keyboard because you just want a response. And I think a lot of people are not taking full responsibility of what they say, because it's nice to be part of this group that's attacking or saying. We had a similar case where somebody, a socialite in Sarawak, had a party and then they got infected, and then it just, her lifestyle was high end, and she made a point about saying, what's wrong with my lifestyle? And then it just became viral and people were attacking, I'm not saying she's right, she's wrong, but people are just attacking because they got all the free time in the world, and then they are pinpointing exact moments or exact things. It's like this recently in Malaysia, we had this Dutch designer who said something that now it's cultural appropriation of fashion. It's gone beyond that, So I think it is affecting a lot of people because they're online and they're watching everything.
Yeah, and to that point about watching everything, I mean, we had somebody in Australia who was talking about their Fifth Amendment rights, and they were screaming at a Bunnings. It's a hardware store by, everything from plumbing to whatever. And they're there yelling and screaming and talking about their Fifth Amendment rights. And the poor security guard goes, but we're in Australia. We don't have any amendments like that. And it's like, it was on TV. I didn't personally see it, but I just was like, people are also watching other, I'm going to call it bad behavior. I find it bad behavior, but just, and mimicking it without any thought at all, which I find amazing. Like not even going, oh, that's another country with different rules. We don't have Fifth Amendment rights here.
That's true. You mentioned that about Ghana and America. It's happening all over the world. People are watching America and thinking that, oh, we've got the same thing. Cultural appropriation become a big issue here now. I'm 62. I never heard of that word 10 years ago.
If we take the issue is that we don't have a respect for education sufficiently in the world, and we conflate the issue of education, lifelong learning, with being ready for a job. In my view of education, particularly a university education or a post-high school education, so I'm not saying it has to be university, there's a plethora of options for a person going through life, is not to worry about the next job. Read a book that you're not going to read because you have to. And that's going to give you a lot more. My father is an artist, and I've learned more about business development and about process management, whatever else, from him as an artist than I have from my wonderful mentors. I've had wonderful mentors in my life. So we've just got to get back to respecting intellectual and this dumbing down where the person who is important is the person who is on TV. It's not the case. He or she is not important. And it's people that are not on TV that we should be talking to.
Sure. I think that I always believe that everybody's got a story to tell. Everybody's got information that they can share, but we must be willing to hear what they've got to say and listen to what they've got to say. Right? And you may not agree or you may take things on board, but I think it's important to have an open mind, right? I think one of the issues that I find in terms of acceptable behavior is a closed mind of a lot of people. They are only very focused on what they want to achieve. They disregard the rest of the society around them. I'm not sure whether you've faced any of that in your respective areas, but how does this concept of me, myself, and I influence the behavior people have and your interactions with them?
In Malaysia, at least the Kardashian effect is really, really bad here. Influencers have now, they're the biggest multimillionaires, you know, they have 7 million followers, they have 500,000 likes on each posting. That's higher than most countries. But they govern the business side, which is very scary. Now it's gone into the commercial and the business side. Reality TV, reality lifestyles are not real anymore, you know. So that's what's happening in Malaysia, even in the business sense. So all traditional values, all traditional styles of doing business may not work as well as, oh, let's flash, let's be outrageous, you know.
Yeah. How about you, Rebecca? You've had a lot of exposure to different groups of people in different societies.
I mean, it's interesting because I don't think my kids know about the Kardashians in Ghana. And I don't think that there are any there's not that kind of role modeling. So I feel like there's a wave effect that we're probably experiencing, because hearing Joe talk about the Kardashians in Malaysia kind of makes me really sad, because there was a time when I was living in Singapore where that would not have been the case.
Whatever that is, and I'm sure it's the case in some cases, it's what do we do about it as individuals? What are we going to take away? And our responsibility is to live the life that we want and try and share that. And if we focus on long-term relationships, if we focus on leaving things on the table for our counterparties, sure, we might have short-term losses, and we may feel we've been exploited, as Tess referred to earlier. But long-term, the benefits of doing that means that you are passing that along as an approach to life and business. Will you have setbacks? Absolutely. Is it the right thing to focus on the team? Absolutely. In the long term, karma always comes back.
How about yourself? Do you find sometimes you don't get a chance to say much because somebody else is in there and dominating the situation? Is that something the younger generation entering the corporate environment face?
We find ways to speak up. That's what I would say.
What would those ways be? Good for us to learn as well.
Diplomatic ways in which everyone achieves equality and peace.
I mean, I think that's really interesting, because we do a lot now of communication via the phone with all its apparatuses, you know, whether it's Facebook or Skype or SMS or iMessage, all those things. And what's really interesting is that we're communicating, but now we're communicating in ways where we can cancel an appointment without actually picking up the phone.
So that's an annoying behavior from way back. As soon as the mobile phone came up, people would just change appointments because, well, you know, you could just tell people on the fly, right? I'm running late, or move it to another location. In the past, you had to get to a landline, and if nobody is home, that's it. So you got to make your appointment. So people have become a lot lazier or smarter, depending on how you want to look at it.
No, it's not acceptable. I mean, like Rebecca said earlier about how her current client makes appointments 6 months in advance and stick to it. But now at the slightest whim, people cancel appointments. People tell you that they're going to be late. People just WhatsApp, you know, like it's crazy. There's no work ethics have gone out, you know. Tess, you tell us, because I find sometimes young people don't understand work ethics, you know. They need to understand balance. I'm not thinking that we're right. I think it's a TikTok generation. I like young people, but sometimes work ethics is like, it's okay if I'm not on time, but it's not okay, you know. That's my perception about work ethics, you know.
I hear you. I agree. Punctuality is very important. So regarding work ethics, right? The word ethics itself is a set of rules. So rules, you have to establish them, right? You have to come to a consensus between the younger generation and the old generation. There has to be communication between each of them in order to agree on whether this is right and whether this is wrong. So that's where we stand on this. We seek your guidance, we seek your support in this,
Okay.
If the question is work ethic in terms of FaceTime in the office, I think what I remember when I was in New York working with Macquarie Bank, there were times when I finished my work at 3 o'clock and I actually wanted to go and visit a museum. I wanted to focus on things, and that was frowned upon. I'd finished my work, mind you, but I was told that you must put hours in the day in the office. So what's fantastic about the COVID period is this notion that 9 to 5 has to be the way is moving away. So I don't mind if my team, they put in a good 8 hours. What that 8 hours is, given that we are a global business, I'm less worried about it. If they're worried about COVID, stay home, don't come to the office, work from there. We've got to find a balance. But that's the issue, that we should respect people's boundaries. And then obviously with the WhatsApp culture, I'm very used to sending, my colleagues are in the office listening to this, and they're used to getting WhatsApps from me at all hours. But I've actually stopped doing that because it's to think that they must action that WhatsApp. We have to find a way to respect people's private time in a world that there are no boundaries.
Well, they can always go mute on you after office hours, and
Please don't do that.
It's a good thing you brought up WhatsApp, because I think WhatsApp has been in the news of late for its new terms and agreements. So that's something that you could question about acceptable behavior, because they've introduced a new set of terms and agreements, and you either agree with it or you cannot use it. And to agree with it means you lose your privacy, they have access to your data, they have access to your behavior, and that is, of course, to help them commercially via Facebook and so on and so forth. As a result, of course, there's been a migration of people to Signal and Telegram, LinkedIn, and a whole lot of other sort of services that offer similar sort of things. But big organizations, Google, Facebook, WhatsApp, they just do things, right? Granted, it is free. They provide the service free, and they feel they have a right to do this, maybe. But is that still acceptable, that they impose these sort of conditions and expect you to just accept it?
Privacy is an issue. Obviously, we're all subject to confidentiality agreements with various transactions. And if you're telling me that people can breach that without our knowing, I'd like to find out more. But look, I think what is privacy, and how can you avoid some of these things? And there's the old style approach to getting market intel and getting corporate intelligence that we all know still goes on, both old school and new school. So if people want to find out something, they will. But it is what it is.
I mean, I think it's really interesting. I mean, I just looked, Sanjay actually posted a question around TV and role modeling, but I was thinking about an article I read about Netflix and about how we never read the credits anymore because it's not in their interest, because they want us to move on to the next thing. And that maybe if we allowed that time for processing, we wouldn't actually want to watch something else. But because we actually haven't processed it, we haven't actually digested it. And so it's easy to move on. And I think we do that with terms and conditions. I think we're so quick to move on because we can, with clicks of buttons now, that we, again, for me, it comes down to how conscious and how thoughtful we are.
I think with terms and agreements also, they're voluminous, right? They're huge chunks of words and paragraphs and worded in such a way that you'll have to read them many times to make sure the intent is clear quite often.
It's very hard, especially legal terms, who reads chunks and pages and pages.
We should, I guess, but it's a good thing some people read it and made enough noise about it so that now people realize what they're signing, what they're agreeing to. But no, less than that is a fact that you either take it or you can't use it. You either agree to it or you can't use it. It's not as if I don't agree to it, but I can use the previous version of it and carry on as was. You know, it's that do or die sort of behavior. I think, is that acceptable by most people? The fact that large organizations do that and get away with things.
It's personally your choice and a market demand. Like I was okay with WhatsApp because I'm already in Facebook. They already got all my information, so I feel as if it's okay. Like what other information? I've not divulged anything else. So it's a choice too. Are there any other alternatives for me? Not that I'm comfortable with. So I'm okay with WhatsApp. And I've gravitated to WeChat too because quite a lot of people are using WeChat from certain parts of the world.
Well, I think a lot more are going towards Telegram and Signal now because of the privacy factors. Well, we've got some questions coming in. Please continue to do them. Let's look at some of them. We've got something from Suresh who was asking, with 3 generations gathered for dinner on a table, who decides what is culturally appropriate with regards to handphone usage or leaving the table without asking the elders? Who is to compromise, or do the elders move with times and accept such behavior? Rebecca, you got 5.
For me, it's a conversation. I think that there are times when it can be informal, and I think it can be times where I'm very demanding, and I say, I actually want us to be present and I want us to have conversation. And I kind of feel that with conversation, everything's possible, because sometimes it's okay to have a quick and dirty meal, and sometimes you actually want to sit down and connect. So I just feel like everything is around taking the time to connect and have a conversation, which would go back to that point where, Joe, you were talking about the lynch mob and how somebody wrote something. We're so quick to judge and say that this is right or wrong. And I'm sure that it's like a rubber band. It's just this rubber band that we're able to change shape with in terms of holding the tension and keep shifting it.
I think the one interesting point that Suresh raises is the value of and the worth of good behaviour, whatever that's defined. Because yesterday, for example, one of my young colleagues came to the house and we went to a meeting together. And he spent some time with my wife. And the thing that she said to me after was, what a well-behaved young man he is. So I think the value of projecting good behaviour as a young person, an older person, and having that dialogue and conversation, as Joe and Rebecca have said, that is so refreshing these days when we open the door for each other, when we are empathetic. I just encourage people on this call just to be more, share more, listen for more, because people are suffering during COVID. They want to be heard, and they probably won't tell you unless you ask 3 times. I think that value of good behaviour must be encouraged.
I think Tess mentioned it. Sorry, just touch on what Tess mentioned earlier about having this dialogue between the old and the young. And like George said, we have to teach them in a good way. It's like Rebecca said too. It's not all the time you cannot use your handphone. There'll be times that I will allow you to use handphones. But there is this dialogue of good behavior. Not all the time rigid, and we have to understand. I think the young ones are taking over the world, and I'm glad they are taking over the world. But they need to have help about good behavior, etiquette, and all that.
The whole world thinks you're still 20, so we all think you're still a young one.
Well, Tess is still a young one, but I don't know about teaching them, because I think they have to form their own ecosystem eventually. And what we went through as we were growing up, finding a career, sticking with a company, doing the job, those jobs are gone. So what value can we impart to them about doing that sort of stuff? When jobs are changing, when businesses are shifting, industries are vanishing, new ones are coming up, the old ways may not necessarily work. So I think the younger generation will find their own way. Do we really have to teach them everything? Some basic things in relation to how you relate to us, maybe, but beyond that, it's your turf, your space. You've got to figure it out, I think. That's just my point of view. Tess, I'm with you on this one, by the way.
No, she's absolutely right. And I think that you Moon Lee said the same thing. It's a dialogue and we exchange. They teach us some new tricks and we teach them some, and then it's up to them to discuss and dialogue. I have 2 young kids in the office that for the last 4 years I'm grooming. And I think it's a good balance of them teaching me what's the new ways and what I can learn to do, and I'm teaching them little things, always, that can work too. So it's halfway.
Yeah.
It's good to have a perspective, right? A sense of history as well, so you understand some of the things.
There's no problem in young people moving on. I think what we're creating is long-term relationships. So my view is, and I'm fortunate that a lot of my team have stayed on for a number of years. And those who have moved on, we've still stayed in touch with an alumni program. So for us, it actually, you revel in other people who want to experience something else and move on. Sometimes they come back. And I always take the view that I would love to have some of the people who left us come back. So we want to create lifelong relationships. And that's one of the beautiful things I learned in Singapore over the last 10 years. When I first came here as a Westerner, I thought if I was invited to a meeting, I had to have all the solutions. In Asia, if you're invited to the table, it's because you're actually valued. And it doesn't mean you have to have a point of view about everything. Your time will come. And so I might not win business with my network for 8 years, but at the right time, they will give me the business that is the right business. So I think we've got to learn to relax and live in the moment. And I'm turning 50 this year, so I want to learn how Joe stays young. But that's the whole point. Let's focus on lifelong journeys together.
Yeah, that's something that we're hearing a lot about, right? Lifelong education and stuff like that. But it's, I think, sometimes too structured still. These are courses that you attend, these are courses that you take, so do them because at the end of the day, they want a workforce that is useful to the economy. But look at yourself. How useful are you to yourself, right?
What is the most useful thing is curiosity and the ability to adapt. And that's not something you can learn by reading a particular textbook. It's just having the confidence. And we're all nervous people. All 5 of us here are nervous talking to a we don't know, we're either talking to ourselves or to 1,000 people or to 100 people. We don't know if we're resonating with the audience. So we're nervous. It's natural to be nervous. But it's having that curiosity to look beyond around the corner. One of the things I've learned from my wife is, don't just decide to go to that restaurant when you're traveling overseas. Let's go around the corner and see what's on the other side. And we discover things. When we go to Penang for the festival that Joe organizes, what I love about the festival he does, he puts his exhibitions in the most unexpected places. So you're forced to have dialogue, whether you like it or not, with people that you're not going to interact with. So those are things that Joe does. I mean, I remember the Indigo Blue exhibition. That goes back, 5 years, 6 years, Joe? I'm still talking about it because you had it in different locations. You had to go through different parts and you had a dialogue with people. So I just think, let's have some fun and let's talk more to artists.
This whole series is about curiosity. It's really, I'm curious to find out what people think and how they are reacting to things. So hence these chat sessions as well. So we got a question from Sanjay regarding television and movies shaping bad behavior. Are there enough good role models in those platforms? And should they be regulated?
I'm amazed because I see people watching a lot of YouTube, kids watching a lot of YouTube. And the ones that they're looking at are these ones where kids are always talking back to the parents. And there's a lot of violence and there's a lot of bad behavior in different shots, right? Whether it's personally risky or whether it's disrespectful. And I remember, okay, I'm not saying it was great television back in the day, but back in the day when I was brought up with my one television channel for several years that came on from 5 to 9, and then they added some other stations, and then there was very little to watch. But what we saw was, kids talking respectfully to parents, employers talking respectfully to their employees, and all of that kind of stuff. And so now it's not explicit, but I'm sure we take on these attitudes via osmosis.
I think also in the past, government had a lot of control over broadcast, what was broadcast. So they would control the narrative. Now it's too open for them to be able to do much. So they try very hard to control what you see and read, but they can't. There's so many ways for information to go out. So the genie's out of the bottle on that one, so it's going to be a bit hard to shove it back in. but how best do we cope with it? Because I think we do have access to a lot of various types of films, and some great, some not so great. Do they influence you? So, Tess, for instance, when you were growing up, did any of these sort of serials and TVs like influence how you behaved, or what influenced you as you were growing up?
Can I just point something about Rebecca said first before I answer the question?
Yeah, sure.
So you mentioned about how the shows that are watching have changed. I was thinking perhaps it's because the people that are creating them have changed. Like they took over. So we're learning from the previous generation and we didn't like this attitude. So we're going to give this attitude, that kind of thing. So maybe that's the reason why. And also the Gen Z millennial people, we are very, very connected. That's why we're able to get information everywhere. Like what Kanan said about, we're just being permeated by things. We don't even ask for it. So this media diet we have, it's very important for us to regulate it. And sometimes we do need guidance as to which is suitable for you. It's not about brainwashing you into being a robotic citizen. It's more of are you human enough to be human? You see, the empathy that we need, like George brought up. We need to promote this tolerance, understanding among each other, regardless of race, religion. The Singapore pledge.
Words to live by, and we should try and live by most of those words. I think sometimes you kind of forget some of those words, but yeah, okay, yes, of course. Sorry, just go on.
No worries. So Kanan's question about what influenced me, the library, I would say. The one thing that my parents did, I love them for it, it's they brought me to the library. That is where, up to this day, I am reading things that I shouldn't be reading. Not saying that I'm reading a banned books or stuff like that, but things that would interest me, would help me move forward in life. So that's very characteristic of this generation. We want something, we go for it, we work towards that, and we find ways in which that will enable us. That's why the internet is so prevalent in our lives. We grew up with it. It's something that we can always look to,
So I think, are you reading, do you go to the library, or did the library come to you on your mobile phone?
Oh, it goes both ways.
I just think, Tess, you're so inspiring. Your parents should be credited. Good upbringing, good parenting, and what George said, it's all up to us as individuals. And if you've had a good upbringing and if you get a good exposure, you go the right way.
I'm just wondering, Tess, how many of your friends are so into books? Because when you said books, I was like, yes. Is it a common thing? Because I don't feel like it is.
It depends on the type of friends that are around. So you have like different pockets of friends. Some would prefer manga, like the anime comic books. Yeah. Some prefer documentaries. Some prefer crime. So it doesn't have to be books. As long as it's material that they can learn something from, most of them, they have a particular interest and they are willing to find out more about it. That's what is very, I find very optimistic about.
So yeah, Dom's point was about the 7 C's of empathy, and he says most have come up today. There's a curiosity, collaboration, care, consciousness, courage, customer-centric, and connection. And we need all 7 right now. I think this, I don't know whether it's been made more apparent that we need it during the lockdown, or whether the changing times have necessitated that kind of appreciation of these values. But do you see down the line, as when we do get out of this pandemic situation, that things would have changed irreversibly to some extent? Would certain things have changed permanently? Do you figure that would be the case down the line?
I think the time people spend reflecting, I do hope we change for the better, to care for an environment, to have better dialogue, to rethink, reevaluate meaning of what you do, even whatever you do, whether you're a banker, or a festival director, or a speaker, or a tennis player, whether it's meaningful what you do, and how do you contribute to yourself or people around you. So I'm hoping for a good change.
Rebecca?
Yeah, I think there are some great changes. I really feel like at a village level in the cities, there's been a lot of changes, positive ones. I'm also seeing some sort of social ones that I find concerning in terms of the way, for example, now in Australia, we have this COVID thing. So we log on, we check in, and then if you're at a restaurant, the menu comes up. And so there's a lot of jobs now that are being sort of folded into the COVID check-in, lots of jobs. And so on one hand, I feel like there's a lot of positive changes on the human level. And then on a kind of society level, I'm wondering how young people who aren't in universities and aren't on that academic track, what kind of jobs and how we create that sort of engagement. Because if there's no work for people who typically do those entry-level jobs, then how do we keep society inclusive?
Well, in Singapore, even a hawker could be taking a polytechnic course to get it to get a hawker license. You never know. But the entry-level jobs would be one that's challenging. I think jobs for the next generation would be a difficult one to manage, because they are either jobs that are so new that you still have to learn to understand what it is you need to do in that role, or so many existing jobs will be phased out due to automation and technology, or just being irrelevant, I guess.
And you don't need to learn for them. There was a guy in Kenya who started at the age of 12 fixing drones and building drones out of scrap metal and stuff. And now he's got an incredibly successful business, a drone business, but he's completely unschooled. So that's the other mix.
Oh, is that the boy who harnessed the wind, the movie?
No, it's a different one, but similar.
Okay.
It's different. I'll send you some info later.
Okay,
cool. George, you got something to add to that?
Change has been here every time. We look at the size of computers in the 50s and then what we have now. So jobs are constantly changing and jobs are evolving, and the notion that we as older people know what those jobs of the future will be, it's actually the young people who are telling us what they should be. I mean, coding is being done by 10-year-olds and 15-year-olds and, not by 60, well, sometimes by 60-year-olds. So I think some of the future is being driven by our young people. We should celebrate that. But look, you asked the question about change. Yes, lots of things. I think it's been acceleration. Everyone was talking about e-commerce. Everyone was talking about using these sort of communication platforms. And when we are free again, I'm sure there's going to be a whole series of reversion to experience travel. But will I need to spend 50% of my time away from home traveling? Probably, whether I like it or not, I'll be told it's not necessary. So we haven't suffered. I've got to say, we've won business, we have closed business. That's because we adapted before COVID, and it's a testament to our advisory board and network that we had the right people in different parts of the world who could ensure that we kept up our progress. So it wasn't guaranteed that we would be successful, and we have not been as successful as other people have been. But I just think we should revel in change. The one thing I would ask is that people should find quiet personal time. When I was preparing for this, Rebecca, I looked at Rebecca's website as a leadership group, and I forget the name right now. She can say it later. And they organise these walks around different areas of the world where they take teamwork. And I must say, I get my best ideas come when I have alone time and I'm walking in the evening. Long walks, program something in the brain, and usually in that relaxed form, something pops out. So I do believe we should find time, not just to constantly be in a rat race, but find some quiet, reflective time.
Consciously, the things that have changed during the pandemic for you, how many of them would you want to continue as a personal sort of thing?
I think I speak from experience that this is the first time everyone is working from home at such a large scale. I personally enjoy working from home. So I hope that this stays. And there's one caveat to working from home though. It's that what do we do with the office spaces now? So I think it was Deloitte or something that came up with, was it KPMG? I can't remember. But they came up with this idea of taxing people who work from home. So if this were to become the new normal, would people fight against this tax? So very like food for thought, you know? Do we really want to continue working from home, or should we go back to the office?
Yeah, I mean, that's just government's way of trying to support big businesses because they are hand in hand, right? So that's a different discussion altogether, but some of these things could well come into effect very fast. Okay, we are on at the end of the discussion. I just wanted a parting thought from each of the panelists. Are you more or less tolerant today?
More for me. More. I'm learning. I'm learning from what I see and what George has just said, and Rebecca and Tess. I'm learning. More tolerant.
More tolerant, okay. Rebecca?
Oh, look, it's my life's goal to be more tolerant every single day.
Okay. So getting there.
Yeah.
Okay. George?
Absolutely. It's a lifelong journey, and we all have subconscious biases, and we have to work at them all the time.
Okay. And Tess?
Definitely way more. If I could leave everyone with how to be more tolerant and how to ensure you are able to develop this acceptable behavior, is to be AIR. You know, AIR, AIR. So it stands for being authentic, intentional, and relevant. So if you have these three in core, I think you are able to improve yourself, you know, and make the world a better place. Very, very naive thought of our generation, but it's very, very hopeful of us. So if you ever forget, just breathe in and it's AIR.
Yes.
What a star. I mean, what an absolute star. I mean, I'm so inspired just talking, listening to Tess.
The older folks in this group are glad that Tess You agreed to join the session. Thank you for your inputs. In fact, thank you everybody for all your thoughts and life experiences, I guess, in terms of how you have to face and deal with people with whether you like the behavior or not, right? At the end of the day, I think some things will change, some won't, but we still need to figure out how best we can move forward on our own, how we can do it ourselves, right? So we've just got to learn from everybody, learn from the Tessas and the Joes, the Rebeccas and the Georges of the world, and see what we can apply and make our journey a much more meaningful one for not just ourselves, but everybody else, right? And thank you so much for all of that.
Ask one question for Joe and Tess. Who makes better laksa, Penang or Singapore?
Obviously, Penang. Come and try it out again. But Singapore produces brilliant young people, you know. I hired an intern from LaSalle, 2 interns. They were brilliant. They were ready for work. So Tess, credit to LaSalle, credit to your parents. Really, Singapore does produce young talent.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm sure we do. Yes.
Thank
you very much, everybody. Thanks for your time. Thanks to the audience for your wonderful questions. There were a lot raised, and I didn't do justice to the questions, I think. But hopefully we can raise these issues again in a session down the line. Thanks again.